Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name's James Connolly. I'm the Director of Federal Fiscal Compliance and Reporting Division at TEA. I've been at TEA for 14 years and in this position almost 5 years. The first thing I want to say is thank you for your patience. It has taken lots of emails and phone calls and follow up with the US Department of Education to get the answers that we needed to provide you with the information that you need on this compliance requirement. So this afternoon, the goal is to provide a general overview of maintenance of equity, but you'll also see throughout the presentation that we highlight the revised or new guidance that we have received. Before getting into the bulk of the presentation, I wanted to give a couple of important notes. One, as Nick outlined, this webinar is being recorded and it will be uploaded following the presentation. That might take a couple of days, so please be patient, but it will get uploaded. Similarly with the PowerPoint slides, we will get those uploaded to the website as well. We took down the old one because this version does contain some updated guidance and we wanted to avoid confusion. Another thing I wanted to note is that the PowerPoint does include some revised deadlines that were also outlined in the Gov delivery. However, we certainly understand the numerous challenges that LEAs across the state are facing. So please note that we will work with LEAs that are unable to meet those deadlines. The only request that we have is that if an LEA is unable to meet that deadline, is if they could let us know by the deadline when they think they can submit that. That just helps us keep track of when to expect things. And then also we can take you off of our reminder emails, which I know can probably get frustrating if you've already told us when you can submit something. One of my colleagues, Luis Garza, who is the project lead in my division for maintenance of equity, is monitoring the Q&A. So if we get a lot on a particular topic, then he may stop me and we may discuss them. If not, we will address as many as possible at the end of the presentation, time permitting. Okay, so this is the standard disclaimer that we have. So essentially, this presentation is for informational purposes only. It represents our current understanding of this topic, but it doesn't constitute legal guidance. So please keep that in mind. Okay, so what are we going to discuss this afternoon? First and foremost, what is maintenance of equity, or MOEquity? You may have previously seen the acronym MOQ. Those are one and the same thing. So we're going to look at what is maintenance of equity, three methods of demonstrating an exception or compliance, and also the timelines. So on this slide, you'll see one of the changes that we've been asked to make, which is a minor change in verbiage using the word accepted rather than exempt. One thing to note, though, is that while the word has changed, there is no difference from an LEA's perspective. For example, and if an LEA was previously referred to as automatically exempt and is now referred to as automatically accepted, they're still not required to do anything other than to review the list on the website and verify that the information is correct. So what's the purpose and intent of local maintenance of equity? Well, I guess the boo factor is that it's a new fiscal requirement, fiscal compliance requirement. The yay is, though, that it's only for 2 fiscal years. It's for fiscal years 22 and fiscal year 23. But in a nutshell, the purpose of local maintenance of equity is to ensure that campuses with the highest concentration of low-income students within each LEA are not disproportionately impacted by state and local funding reductions in either FY22 or FY23. So the next sort of key question then is, so which LEAs are impacted by this new fiscal requirement? Well, in essence, LEAs that receive grant funding authorized by Section 2001 of the American Rescue Plan, or ARP Act, which includes ESS ER3, ESS ER Supplemental, and T-Class. It does not apply to the ARP IDEA funds, but every LEA that gets the ARP IDEA funds also gets one of the 3 grants listed on the slide. So that's moot. But those are the 3. Essentially, if an LEA gets one or more of those, then they are subject to this requirement. So maintenance of equity has sort of 2 tests or 2 components in it. And they are that an LEA can't reduce the state and local per pupil funding, and it can't reduce the FTE staff per pupil at any high poverty campus by more than the average of reductions at all of the campuses within the LEA. On the next slide, we're going to discuss what the definition of a high poverty campus is. But those are the 2 things that an LEA cannot do with regards to their high poverty campuses. So how does an LEA identify its high poverty campuses? Essentially, an LEA is required to rank their campuses based on the low income percentage, using the same method that is used to rank campuses on the SC 5000 schedule of the ESSA consolidated grant application. And it has to identify the top 25% of those campuses. One important clarification here is that the 25% rounds up to the nearest whole number. So in a couple of simple examples, if an LEA has 4 campuses, then it must identify 1 high poverty campus. However, if an LEA has 5 campuses, then it must identify 2 high poverty campuses, as you can't have a quarter of a campus. So this slide probably reflects some important new information which I've highlighted, but I'll go over all of the key information on the slide. So we said in terms of the test about funding is what state and local funding is included. So it is all sources of state and local funds that an LEA has allocated to each of its campuses for free public education. It does not include dedicated funds for capital outlay and debt service. It does not include federal funds, including supplanted ESS/ER funds. This is the yellow highlight is one of the areas where we received the updated guidance from USDE. Essentially, LEAs need to use the board adopted budget in effect at the PIMS fall snapshot date and use that consistently for each year. So you use that for fiscal year 21, fiscal year 22, and next year when we're doing maintenance of equity, you would use it for fiscal year 23. So essentially it is the budget of the board adopted budget in effect at the PIMS full snapshot is used for this year. We're going to compare the FY21 to the FY22, and in both cases, it's the board adopted budget in effect at the PIMS full snapshot date. You do not use actual expenditures for FY21. Another clarification that we got from USDE, though, is that an LEA would have to submit a revised version of the tool, the maintenance of equity tool, if it were to make changes to the board adopted budget with regards to the amount made available to high poverty campuses, if those changes could potentially impact the LEA's compliance status. So essentially what that means is that later this calendar year, we will contact LEAs that complete the maintenance of equity tool and ask them to verify whether or not there have been any changes. So then the next key, the other part of the test is about FTEs. And so which FTEs are included? We received clarification that LEAs must include all paid staff, that's both instructional and non-instructional, paid from all fund sources. That's local, state, and federal. Another important clarification is that LEAs must include all FTEs that provide campus-level services, regardless of whether they are considered district or LEA level or campus-level positions. So it's where the services, where they're performing the services, rather than how they may be classified. That is important in terms of whether or not they are included. LEAs must include all employees hired by contract who perform campus-level services. And if an LEA, if a member of staff splits their time between more than one campus, then the proportion of the FTE would be counted towards each campus. So if they split between 50% of their time between campus A and 50% campus B, then it would be 0.5 would be allocated to both campus A and campus B. Unfortunately, we realized that probably the divisions won't be quite that straightforward, but essentially that same principle would hold true, that the percentage would have to be calculated and then assigned accordingly. I realize I didn't say something important on this slide. So I wanted to call out the elephant in the room and say that we recognize that there is a disconnect between the two components of local maintenance of equity, as the financial component only considers state and local funding, whereas the FTE component considers all FTEs, including those paid with federal funds. We did request an explanation for this, but we did not receive one. However, we have verified, double-checked, triple-checked, and then quadruple-checked that the information that we provided on these two slides is correct. So there are two test methods with regards to local maintenance of equity. There is a district-wide method, which in essence compares each high poverty campus to the average of all campuses within the LEA, or there is Greatspan testing, where that compares the each high poverty campus to the average of the campuses within the Greatspan that campus belongs to. And an LEA could demonstrate compliance using either method. Okay, so the first thing we'll deal with here is that with automatic exceptions, which again was previously referred to as automatic exemptions, but the criteria stayed the same. It's just that that word is changed from exemption to exception. But essentially, there are three ways that an LEA can be automatically accepted from this requirement. If the first being if they have less than 1,000 students, the second if they have a single campus, and the third is if they only have one campus per grade span. So for fiscal year 2022, for the test, what we're looking at now is that we use data from the SC 5000 schedule in the 2021-2022 ESSA consolidated grant application. And that will follow a similar process in FY23, except that we'll use data from the 2022-2023 ESSA consolidated grant application. The good news is that for FY22 is that we identified 868 automatically accepted LEAs. Unfortunately, that does mean that there are 343 LEAs that were not automatically accepted. So what does that mean for your particular LEA? If for the 868 automatically accepted LEAs, there are, if all LEAs can look at this, is on the website, there is a list of automatically accepted LEAs, that 868. There's one version that is just alphabetical by LEA. There is another that is subdivided by ESC and then alphabetically sorted by LEA. Ultimately, if your LEA is on that list and the information is correct, you do not need to do anything else. However, if you're not included on that list and you think that you should be, then please use the email address on the screen and contact us and let us know if there's been a change or what you think why you think you should be on that list, and we will look into that for you. Okay, so this slide here is for the LEAs that are not automatically accepted, those 343 LEAs. Essentially, we need them to submit what we're calling the MOEquity document submission plan, which is a Qualtrics survey, and to do so by March the 4th. And sort of for information, it takes approximately 5 minutes, probably less, to complete this survey. So when you complete the survey, you'll identify your LEA name and CDN, but then you'll have 3 options that you can choose from. The first one, plan 1, is to complete the LEA self-certification of exception. Essentially, that corresponds to USDE's Appendix B. So this Appendix B is the Appendix B to USDE's FAQs on maintenance of equity. They've actually posted multiple versions of those FAQs, but the most recent is from December 29th, and a link to that is available on our Maintenance of Equity webpage. There is a link for the webpage on the last of this slide, but ultimately, if you run into any problems trying to find our resources, then let us know. Plan 2 is to submit an exception request to USDE. As we will discuss, like that is probably the final option that an LEA should choose, because USDE has indicated that approval of such exception requests will be few and far between. Previously, that was referred to as a waiver, but USDE has indicated that they cannot waive an LEA from this requirement, but they can accept them from a requirement. Plan 3 is to complete the maintenance of equity tool that I referred to in a couple of slides earlier. That essentially is a Excel tool that that we created to assist LEAs with demonstrating compliance if they're unable to complete the self-certification. So on the next few slides, we're going to go into detail about what each of those options means and looks like. Okay, so plan 1. So what is plan 1? It is the LEA self-certification of exception. Essentially, when an LEA selects this option within the Maintenance of Equity document submission plan, which is the Qualtrics survey, an additional part of that Qualtrics survey opens up that duplicates the language from Appendix B of the USDE's Maintenance of Equity FAQs. This Appendix B language is a little confusing, but we have verified with USDE that an LEA that completes the certification is certifying or affirming that there is not an aggregate reduction in combined state and local per pupil funding within the LEA in FY22. Previously, there was some language in there about not reducing the funding at any campus, but that has been updated to reflect the exact language that is in Appendix B of USDE's guidance. So what I want to do now is to give an example, because just to try and make it as clear as possible. In essence, an LEA can complete the self-certification if there is a per pupil reduction at one or more of its campuses, as long as there is not a per pupil reduction when looking at all campuses within the LEA. So essentially what that means is that if an LEA were able to complete the self-certification before, they do not need to resubmit the self-certification. However, it may be that there are some LEAs that were previously unable to complete this that may now be able to do so. Another important note is that if an LEA selects this option, they do not need to submit any supporting documentation to TEA. Well, they don't need to do so at this time. However, they should maintain documentation in the event that it is requested at a later date. So the second option is to submit an exception request to USDE. Essentially, LEAs can submit a request to USDE citing exceptional or uncontrollable circumstances, such as unpredictable changes in student enrollment or a precipitous decline in the financial resources of the LEA as determined by the Secretary of Education. As I mentioned earlier, USDE has indicated that exception requests will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis and that approvals will be rare. If the LEA decides to take that option, then they would submit the request to USDE at the email address on the slide, and then send a copy to the Federal Fiscal Compliance and Reporting Division as well, so that we know that it has been submitted. So the third option open to an LEA is to complete the maintenance of equity tool. Essentially, this is for LEAs that are unable to complete the self-certification, but don't want to submit an exception request to USDE, is that they would select this option in the maintenance of equity document submission plan. The tool would be due, stated on the slide, on March 11th, 2022. Given the updated information with regards to FTEs and the financial information about using the board adopted budget in effect as of PEIMS full snapshot dates, is that if an LEA has previously submitted a tool to TEA, we will be reaching out to them to ask them to confirm if the information reflects the updated guidance or if they need to submit a revised version of the tool. So, as I mentioned, the maintenance of equity tool is an Excel file that we pre-populate with data. It will pre-populate with data when the LEA selects their CDN, their county district number, and their LEA name. Some of the information that will be pre-populated is campus names and numbers, enrollment data for FY21 and FY22, and then low income data for FY21 and FY22. We took that data for FY21 from the 2020-2021 ESSA consolidated grant application and the FY22 data from the 2021-2022 ESSA consolidated grant application. So an important note here is if the pre-populated data does not accurately reflect your LEA's FY21 or FY22 enrollment or low income data, then you need to email the compliance@tea.texas.gov email address to request an alternative version of the maintenance of equity tool. Just because we want to make sure that anything that you submit accurately reflects all of the data for your LEA, and to avoid any potential issues in the future. So what's some of the data that LEAs need to complete? So there'll be like contact information, and to be clear, that contact information is going to be for the person that we could contact if we had any questions about the data submitted on the form. It's not the contact information for the superintendent. Other information that we'll need is information about the budgeted data in effect as of the PEIMS full snapshot date, the number of FTEs, and then also which campuses have been identified as high poverty campuses. So here you'll see, like, you know, you can see the drop down next to the ESC region. That's going to be the first thing that an LEA does. And then it will only populate the county district numbers associated with that ESC region. And then the district name will populate, and then the tool will populate data with regards to the campuses in your LEA. So defining grade spans. So in a way here, where we try to think of all of the potential options of Greatspan groupings that an LEA has, is that I think inadvertently we may have created some confusion. I think probably the thing to consider is that most LEAs are just going to be using elementary 1, middle 1, and high 1. So any school that's an elementary school, could fit into elementary 1, middle schools into middle 1, and high schools into high 1. It's going to be rare circumstances where an LEA is going to be using elementary 2, middle 2, or high 2. There are some circumstances where that's possible, but I think if you're in any doubt, then do contact us, because this is an area where we've seen some confusion. On the next couple of slides, I'm going to try and give a couple of examples that I hope will help, but if you have specific questions, then please do reach out to us. So in this example, this is an LEA that's got 6 campuses. And so you'll see that some of those elementary schools have some overlap, because you've got campus C with its K through 5, and then campuses A and B have some of those grade spans, but not all of them. But because they all fit within the elementary, they're all elementary schools, is that you would say that elementary 1, that grade span group encompasses the grades EE through 5, sort of the bottom of the range from campus A to the top of the range that's in campus C. Then you have middle 1 for, like, you have campus D that's 6 through 8, a sort of conventional grade span for a middle school. When you have a campus like campus E, where it overlaps sort of 2 different grade spans, is that what you need to consider is where is the largest enrollment. So in this example, the largest enrollment is in grades 6 through 8. So it we put into the middle 1 category. But however, like if there'd have been more students in the 9 through 12, then it would have been classified as in high 1, along with campus F. Okay, in this second example is, again, we have 6 campuses, but I want to show you that there are 2 possible ways that the LEA could group these. So let's say, look, allowable grouping Y is that so the LEA could subdivide their elementary schools, because there is no overlap between campus A, doesn't overlap with campuses B and C. Like there's a distinct break there. There's no overlap in grade span. So they could do the example, what is allowable is the way that they've been grouped in example Y on the screen, the left-hand chart, where you have EE through 2 is elementary 1, 3 through 5 is elementary 2, and then middle 1 is 6 through 8 for campuses D and E, and then campus F is in high 1. But what is also allowed is what is in grouping Z, essentially where you have all of the elementary campuses in that same grade span grouping, and saying the grade span grouping is EE through 5, because they are campuses A, B, and C are all elementary schools. So say either is acceptable, but we expect that most LEAs would use a grade span grouping in this example, like grouping Z rather than Y. So contact information, as I said before, this is the name and details of a member of staff at your LEA that we could contact if we had questions about the data in the maintenance of equity tool. It is not contact information for your superintendent. Although if your superintendent is the person that fills out the form, then obviously it would be the superintendent. But typically we expect it to be someone other than the superintendent. So this slide gives you an indication of the different data fields that will need you to complete in the maintenance of equity tool. We're going to look at them in a little more detail on the coming slides. So for each campus, LEA should select the appropriate Greatspan grouping, such as elementary 1, middle 1, or high 1 next to each campus. And it's important to get that, to do that correctly, because that will then pre-populate the Greatspan worksheet. So the initial worksheet that you'll see when you open the tool is the district-wide worksheet. But then if you select for the first campus, if you select elementary 1, that campus, the data that you enter on that first worksheet will all be copied to the elementary 1 worksheet. But if you change the dropdown that's there for that campus to middle 1, it would remove it from the elementary 1 worksheet and move it to the middle 1 worksheet. So, but you can see that it's important that you select the correct Greatspan for each of your campuses. So for fiscal year 21 data to be entered, so we do note that this is the original the version of the tool. It refers to expenditures because that's the language that USDE uses. However, as we discussed at the beginning of near the beginning of the presentation, the data to go there is the board adopted budget in effect as of the PEMS full snapshot date. And with regards to the FTEs, as a reminder, that's all FTEs performing campus level services. And I also wanted to remind you that if the pre-populated campus enrollment data is incorrect, then you need to contact us at the using the email address on the slide to get a different version of the maintenance of equity tool. Essentially for FY22, it is the same data, but for, as was indicated on the previous slide, but for FY22. So this slide essentially is a duplication of slide A, but given that it's of critical importance, I just wanted to go over it again as a recap. So as a reminder, for state and local funds where it's all sources of state and local funding that the LEA allocates to its campuses for free public education. It does not include dedicated funds for capital outlay and debt service. It does not include federal funds, including supplanted ESS/ER funds. And the LEAs must use that board adopted budget in effect as of the PEMS full snapshot date. And in terms of the FTEs to report, to confirm this is a duplication of slide number 9, but a reminder that it's all staff performing campus level services, regardless of whether they're considered LEA or district or employees or campus level positions. If they're performing those campus level services, they must be included. And it's FTEs, both instructional and non-instructional, paid from all fund sources, including federal funds. So on this slide, the required number of high poverty campuses you'll see is 12. That is cell K4 as indicated on the slide. So in this case, the LEA has got a total of 46 campuses, but which if you divide that by 4, it's 11 point something, but that, we need to round to the nearest whole number as previously mentioned. So that becomes 12 campuses. But then for each, if a campus is a high poverty campus, then the LEA would indicate a Y in that using that drop down. And the LEA would have to make, in this case, would have to select 12. And if it doesn't do 12, then it is going to get an error message. So how do you know if your LEA is compliant once you've entered all the data into the maintenance of equity tool? Well, after all of the data has been inputted, the tool auto-calculates whether or not it's met the compliance standards for both the funding component and the FTE component. On the district-wide tab is the data for each high poverty campus is compared to the average of all campuses within the LEA. And then columns Q and U show you the compliance status. Basically, green is compliant, green is good, red is bad. And on the next slide, we'll see, well, I'll move to the next slide, is that you can see this just reflects on that previous example of the district with, or the LEA with 46 campuses and 12 high poverty campuses. It shows you that for each of those 12, it passed the funding component of the test, but it did not pass the FTE component for 4 campuses. Therefore, you know, in this example, currently the LEA is non-compliant. So I mentioned before that there is both district-wide testing and Greatspan testing. An LEA can be must be compliant for both tests to be considered compliant, but they can pass on a district-wide or a Greatspan basis. If an LEA is not compliant on the district-wide testing, then they could use Greatspan testing. So in the example on the previous slide that I've just brought back on the screen, is that this is on the district-wide basis. The LEA is non-compliant. They could consider attempting to pass on a Greatspan grouping basis. So the Greatspan testing, it compares the identified, for the high poverty campus, if a campus is identified as a high poverty campus and there's Greatspan testing, is that instead of that campus being compared to all campuses within the LEA, it is just compared to other campuses within that Greatspan. So if an LEA decides to use Greatspan testing, there are a couple of important notes here. An LEA is not required to select a high poverty campus from each Greatspan. And it may also be that an LEA could choose Greatspan testing even if there isn't a basis of comparison in one or more of the Greatspans. But an LEA must select high poverty campuses from Greatspans where there is a basis for comparison. So the example on the next slide will explain this. So in this example, there are 8 campuses, so the LEA must select 2 high poverty campuses. So the LEA can't select the high school because there's no basis of comparison within that Greatspan. But the LEA could decide to pick, if they could choose the 2 highest elementary campuses, Houston and Dover, and then they would be, so Houston would then be compared to the 4 elementary campuses, and then Dover would be compared to the 4 elementary campuses. Alternatively, the LEA could select the 2 highest middle school campuses, Birmingham and Coventry, and then Birmingham will be compared to the 3 middle school campuses, and then Coventry would be compared to the 3 middle school campuses. The final option would be is that the LEA could select Houston from the elementary and then Birmingham from the middle as the 2 high poverty campuses. But then again, Houston will be compared to the 4 campuses within the elementary Greatspan grouping, and Birmingham will be compared to the 3 campuses within the middle school grouping. So there are a number of options probably open to the LEA, but the one that is would not be permitted is that the high school campus could not be selected in Greatspan testing because there's no basis of comparison. Comparing the high school to itself is not a test. Okay, so given that all of the data entry occurs on the district-wide worksheet, the LEA must modify its identification of high poverty campuses within that worksheet. So, first of all, the LEA would see if they could pass on a district-wide basis, and if they pass on a district-wide basis, they're good. But if they don't and they explore Greatspan grouping, then it may be that different campuses are selected as high poverty campuses. So if there is a change, any modifications take place in the district-wide worksheet, which will then update those Greatspan worksheets. Sometimes it takes a few seconds, but give it a few seconds, and then you will see the LEA will be able to see whether or not they were considered compliant. So what steps should an LEA take if it's non-compliant using both district-wide and Greatspan group testing? Well, on the funding side is explore whether it's possible to allocate additional funds to non-compliant campuses. Similarly for FTEs, is it possible to allocate additional FTEs to those non-compliant campuses? A final option would be to submit that exception request to USDE. If an LEA does decide to do that, we would ask that they submit an updated MOEquity document submission plan, which is that Qualtrics survey, and indicate that they now plan to do option 2/plan 2. Because one of the things that we always do is that we take the last submitted version of anything that an LEA submits, and we consider that to be the sort of the official or the final version. That's the version that we consider the version of record. So a couple of reminders. All of the entry is completed on the district-wide worksheet, and that you need to enter funding and FTE data for every campus. All campuses that have enrolled students must be included on the worksheet in order for the calculations to be corrected. No campuses can be excluded. Another reminder is most LEAs will only have those 3 grade spans: elementary 1, middle 1, and high 1. There are exceptions to that. I think if you are if you think that you need to use a elementary 2, middle 2, or high 2, I think it would be a good idea to reach out to us, and then we can talk through your example and see if that is the correct course of action. A couple of other reminders. If there is an overlap of grade spans, like for example, you have an alternative campus that serves grades 6 to 12 or 7 to 12, is to determine where the majority of those students fall. And so if they're mostly middle, if they were, in this example, grades 7 through 8, then it'd be classified as middle 1. If most of the students were in grades 9 through 12, then classify as high 1. And as I said, using that elementary 2, middle 2, or high 2 is only if there's no overlap in grade levels. And as I said, we expect that to be the exception rather than the rule. Here are the instructions on how to submit the maintenance of equity tool via GFFC. I'm not going to go over those. I think the instructions on the slide speak for themselves. So just here a quick summary of the potential paths for an LEA. The first one is automatically accepted LEAs. Essentially, we ask that they review the list on the web page. That list got updated on January 31st. There are a couple of minor corrections, but essentially, if you review the information, you're on that list and it's correct, you don't need to take any action. However, if you think that there is an error, and certainly if you're excluded from that list and you think you should be on that list, then please email us at the email address on the slide. There are 3 options for those LEAs that are not automatically accepted. That first one is the self-certification of exception. essentially the LEA would select that option within the maintenance of equity document submission plan. That's the Qualtrics survey that we created. And on that, the LEA essentially is certifying that there's no aggregate reduction in combined state and local per pupil funding across the entire LEA. And that is due on March the 4th. The second option for LEAs that are not automatically accepted is to submit a request directly to USDE for exception from the requirement. As mentioned, that is probably the last option that an LEA should consider, given that USDE has said that exceptions will be rare. But if the LEA does choose that option, then we do ask that they email the two addresses on the screen, one going to USDE, and then the second one so that we know that it has been submitted. That third option for an LEA is completing the maintenance of equity tool, where an LEA can demonstrate compliance on either a district-wide or Greatspan grouping. So the document submission plan, the Qualtrics survey, that's due March 4th, but the actual tool would be due March 11th. So let's now look at all of these timelines on one slide. It seems like a lifetime ago that we post the web page and the initial resources went live at the end of October. But then on February 1st is that we were finally able to send the Gov delivery with updated information regarding budgeted, the data, the financial data that's needed, the FTEs, and then also the revised deadlines. March 4th is for those is when we need the document submission plan completed. That's for those LEAs that are not automatically accepted, those that aren't on the list on the web page. March 11th is the due date for the maintenance equity tool. I'll also restate here what I mentioned earlier. We know there's a lot going on, and an LEA may not be able to meet these deadlines. So just if you could let us know by those dates when you can submit or when you expect to be able to submit, that's just going to help us in terms of planning. And then also that you don't get any follow-up emails from us. Because we know that can be a distraction. Then our goal is to complete reviews then during March through May, and then in June to get the compliance letters posted in GFFC and data collections. That's our goal. I hope that we're able to meet that, but certainly that's what we're hoping for. And then just the contact information. So our general email address, compliance@tea.texas.gov. Depending on the nature of the question, it may need to be something that needs to be included in the ESSER FAQs. They're updated regularly. I think the last updates happened on Friday. And if you have a question that will need to get submitted there, then there is a FAQ submission form. And the final link there is to our webpage.